Awesome. Thank you, Eric. Well, as we get folks on, I'd like to just welcome you to our fourth Arvin Lamont Community Steering Committee Subcommittee related to pesticides. I'm just so grateful for all of the interactions we've had. Before we go into our agenda and what we're doing the rest of the day, we do have Spanish interpretation already turned on. And so if our folks, our partners from Linguistica can maybe give an overview of how to log in and get into the interpretation channels, I'll go ahead and pause for that.
Thank you very much. My name is Catherine, and together with Tania, we are going to be your interpreters today. Instrucciones de interpretación. Si se conecta desde una computadora, verá el icono de globo o mundo en la parte inferior de su pantalla que dice interpretación. Denle clic y seleccione su idioma de preferencia, en este caso el español. Luego dele clic a silenciar audio original o mute original audio y su configuración estará lista. Si está conectado desde un celular, una tablet, un iPad o cualquier otro dispositivo, verá 3 puntos en su pantalla que dirán más o more. Seleccione interpretación y luego su idioma de preferencia, en este caso español. Luego dele clic a silenciar audio original o mute original audio. Quizás tenga que deslizar un poco en la pantalla para que pueda encontrar estas características. Luego dele clic a listo o finalizado o done y habrá completado la configuración de interpretación en Zoom. If you are in a computer, you will see a word glow icon at the bottom of your screen that says interpretation. Please select your preferred language, in this case English, and then mute original audio. If you are on a cell phone, tablet, iPad, or any other device, you will see 3 dots in your screen. Please select interpretation, then select your language, in this case English, and then mute original audio, and finally done to finish the setup. If you want to listen to questions or comments made in Spanish, please stay in the English channel because this will be simultaneously done. Thank you very much. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you so much. Interpretation is on, so if you are able to get to the correct channel, please do so now. If you ever need help, please let us know by stopping us, raising your hand, or placing a comment in the chat. I'm going to share my screen, which will be the agenda that hopefully everyone has seen. For folks that are on the Community Steering Committee that get materials mailed to you, hopefully you have this agenda in front of you, or you've at least seen it. And it's pretty familiar. We have the same kind of standard practice we've been doing for 4 meetings now, where we acknowledge that this is an interagency effort. We welcome you all and thank you all for working with us to establish this subcommittee and making space for it. And so one of the things I like to do at the beginning of this meeting is just to acknowledge all of the different agencies we have on this call. And we really benefit today from having a pretty collaborative discussion with a bunch of different agencies regarding pesticide monitoring. So I just want to acknowledge on the call, we have the Department of Pesticide Regulation, we have the California Air Resources Board, we have the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, and we also have the Kern County Agricultural Commissioner on the call today. So I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you all for helping support this effort that's really community-led and driven, and welcome you all to this call. So before we move forward, we've been doing the same practice for those that are involved in our regular CSC meetings of starting the meeting off with some action items from the previous few meetings. Because this is a more focused effort, we don't have as many as we normally do from our larger CSC meetings, but we did want to update you on progress. So I'll just really briefly, I'm going to pass it to Eric Salas, who for transparency's sake is just going to note what we promised to follow up on and what we've recently done. And then Eric will pass it back to me and I'll introduce our main topic of the day today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Can you all see the action items?
Yes.
Alrighty, perfect. So we had a couple of action items that are pending from our last pesticide subcommittee meeting. The CSC, action item 3.1, the CSC will reach out to the agricultural commissioner about pesticide concerns and usage complaints. So if you were to see anything that looks suspicious or anything that you'd like to know more information of, go ahead and reach out to the local agricultural commissioner, and the number is below for any complaints or any additional information. All right, and scrolling down to our completed section. So the district and DPR will mail out copies of the pesticide fact sheets. The district and DPR have sent out shared pesticide fact sheets. So that's kind of a fact sheet of your local agricultural commissioner, Department of Pesticide, and other great contacts to reach if you were to see any pesticides or anything like that you'd like to know more information about. And I'll go ahead and drop the link to that flyer as well after the action items. And circling back from our last meeting, action item 2.1, flow chart of the information needed to build up to monitoring campaigns. So DPR and CARB will work together on a flow chart to campaign, for monitors. CARB will show a flow chart during the March subcommittee meeting. And this is kind of what we're going to see today.
Thank you, Eric. So this is sort of our first time in this practice. We'll definitely keep moving forward on addressing any remaining action items from each of these meetings, just to follow up with you all, whether it's in between meetings or at the following meeting. So as Eric mentioned, one of the main action items was about monitoring, and it will be addressed today. But before we go there, are there any questions about the action items or just generally how we came about with scheduling today's meeting before I go into sort of the list of topics that we've addressed so far? All right, I'm going to share very briefly, just to kind of set the stage, and then I will pass it to our partner agencies, and I'm just really excited about today's meeting for some of what we've already accomplished with this group. So as a reminder, we came up with a list of, through the SERP, or the Community Emissions Reduction Program, commitments for pesticides. We then worked with you all to come up with a proposed schedule of our bi-monthly meetings and what sort of parts of that commitment we would address. So we talked a lot last meeting about the statewide mitigation efforts. We still need to address some of the sustainable pest management discussions, and that will be moved to a future meeting. So don't worry, because we didn't get to that. But we did know that the next topic was going to be pesticide monitoring. So today we will hear from CARB, from DPR, and other partner agencies about how that will work. And one of the concepts you all had was maybe inviting a community partner who has addressed this with CARB to come today and talk to you all from a community perspective. And so we're really fortunate today to have that be part of the presentation from CARB. Moving forward, just as, and something that we'll kind of go over more in the end of the meeting, but just to remind you, we do have other topics scheduled for the next few meetings, but we are always open to adding more topics and certainly scheduling further out in advance. So I just wanted folks to know, if you're wondering when we'll talk about enforcement or other types of pesticide measures, that is coming up. So we're just grateful for your patience, and also grateful for folks that helped us prepare for today's meeting. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass it to, I'm not sure who first from CARB, but maybe, I don't know if Michelle, you're kind of the main person to pass it to, and thank Michelle, who is our community liaison, for helping coordinate all of this. And if there are no questions for me, we'll go ahead and move on to the main event, which is the monitoring discussion.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'm Michelle, and as you know, I'm kind of your primary liaison, but I work with a lot of people that have a lot more specialty than I do. So James Pham is here, he's with us, and he's going to be to the main CARB presentation. James, I'm not sure if you want to take it now, or if we should go ahead and introduce Dr. Sinclair first.
Yeah, Dr. Sinclair can go ahead and take the floor if he's ready.
Oh, hi everybody. I'm ready.
Yeah, so I'll just let everybody know, Ryan Sinclair, Dr. Sinclair is from the Eastern Coachella Valley. He's one of the co-leads for that group, and so has already experienced kind of going through this planning part of pesticide monitoring. So that's why we wanted him to come speak to you all today. So Ryan, I'm hand it over to you.
Thank you, Michelle. Are you gonna have the presentation that I sent you, or should I present from my screen?
I think if you're okay with presenting from your screen, that'll work.
Okay.
And I will just let everybody know too that I believe the district has already mailed out printed copies of the Spanish versions to everyone. So hopefully everybody has that along with these presentations.
Yes. Can you see that? Okay, and you see the big slide and not the little slide?
We see the main slide.
Okay, great. So I'm Ryan Sinclair. I'm in the School of Public Health at Loma Linda University, but I work a lot in the Eastern Coachella Valley, and I have a lot of projects there. And so I was on the steering committee, the community steering committee in the AB 617. And I joined up with I'm a co-lead in the monitoring work group, and we just went through the process of getting CARB and DPR to do some pesticide monitoring in the Eastern Coachella Valley. And I just wanted to show you all some photos from there and some maps so you get an idea of what it looks like in the Eastern Coachella Valley. And you know, I was going to start with just some frequently asked questions from our CSC when we were first starting out. And I just wanted to go through these first, and then I'll show you some maps and some other things. So I'll kind of tackle it from backwards. And so we'll start with that slide, and just basically, why did we want air monitoring in the ECV, and how was this you know, it was a priority of the AB 617, but to be frank, you know, pesticide air monitoring is pretty complicated because it involves lots of different, I can say media, and therefore lots of different agencies. Pesticides, as they're applied, are for the DPR to work with and monitor, and then the air boards and the air districts also have to be there. So we really wanted the pesticides to be monitored out there as one of our main priorities. And then we had a lot of questions about how are the sites chosen, and we wanted sites that were sensitive receptors, but also sites where you're going to get you'll be sure to get a positive hit. So in other words, make sure that we put the pesticide monitors in places where we know we're going to have data. We don't want to have all the monitoring done and then not have any data. The other one is looking at the information. Can you see the information from these monitors? And these are pump samplers, and they're expected to produce data that is going to be shared in June 2023. So they just finished getting those samples in, and then that data will later be shared back to the community in June. So it's not like a real-time air monitor, not like a PM 2.5 air monitor where you can go online and see like purple air or air qual or one of those things, or one of the regulatory monitors. These are actually collected and analyzed in the lab. So what are they monitoring? This was the hard one because there's so many different pesticides. And so they chose to monitor for 3 that were more or less indicators of a couple of different things. And that's high toxicity, common use, and then they also wanted them to be applied within the same season. But they chose these 3 chemicals here to monitor. 1,3-D, chloropicrin, and MITC. And those are the ones that they wanted to monitor, or they suggested. And then we said, as a CSC, sure, because I'm not a pesticide specialist. I'm actually a microbiologist. So I was learning a lot in this process. But
Hey, Ryan, sorry to interrupt. We do have hands raised. We're happy to wait till the end. Are you comfortable taking questions during your presentation, or do you want us to kind of wait till you get through your slides?
I think that let me get to halfway through, and then maybe I'll take it from you, Mario, if that's okay. Because I just want to give you the overall picture first. I'm starting with the questions, and then I'm going to the picture. So I wanted to just get through this part first. So keep that question there. But the reason why I'm really enthused about this is because the interagency collaboration that it represents. When we, as a CSC member, first starting out and asking about pesticides and getting some kind of like, I don't know, sort of vague answers about it, or not very enthusiastic answers, in our CSC. I can't say non-enthusiastic, but just a statement of limitations about measuring pesticides. That was a bit of a hurdle, but then finally seeing that our AQMD went out and worked with CARB and the DPR and set up the monitoring. And so we're really excited about that. But that's kind of why I wanted to do this. But, our AB 617 in Eastern Coachella Valley, we had a bunch of different priorities. I just wanted to give you that history real quick. It's different than where you are because we have the Salton Sea, but very similar to where you are because we have like a lot of agriculture. And this is a picture of some crops right next to the Coachella Valley High School. And this is one of those bio waste generating electrical generating facilities. So we also had these other items: road dust and open burning and illegal dumping. So those are our SERP priority areas. But the pesticides in agriculture areas was a major issue for us. Okay, so before I go to the maps, maybe I can take your question, Mario.
Yes, I got a question. Do you guys test locations like saying, the black water odors and gases coming out of the fields?
So we didn't address the agricultural wastewater. Is that what?
Yeah.
That what you mean? Because
they call it so many names. They say recycle water. They say all kind of other names, but what basically it is wastewater with chemicals and pesticides, and it creates black water and it's keep the odors, and then it got gases start coming out of the fields when they're drying up.
So I have a different sort of answer for that from my other project, but on this project, all they're doing is looking at air sampling. So they're actually sampling the air.
That's what we need here. Our locations, we need to get samples of what type of gases are coming out of those properties. And I've been finding locations where they're dumping wastewater, and it's just creating more gases and odors coming all the way, say like 2 miles away from Lamont.
Yeah, so
it is getting worse and worse, and I just do not understand why they're not really investigating the problem, what it is, because they investigate, but the problem is that there's no solutions and there's no saying what's out there. What they tested, what kind of pesticides it is, what kind of gases are coming out of these properties. And that's where I'm going at for the past year, trying to get answers and find out what's really going on in our community. Especially it's like 1 mile, 2 miles away where this odor gets really bad here in Lamont every year for the last 2 decades.
I have a couple of thoughts about that. but I wanted to go back, we have these 3 indicators there, but that's not set in stone, that's in the Eastern Coachella Valley. So in your steering committee process, if that's a major concern of the steering committee, then that should be what they're going after.
I feel it's not the main concern because we already got 2 decades with this same problem. And I don't see no solution on it. And be honest with me, before our 617 finish, I want to make sure that it's fixed proper and that we don't get these gases coming out at these locations. And I just want to fix because it's getting worse. Every year it's getting worse. And I know something's wrong, but nobody's seen it. And I just do not understand that.
Yeah, and thank you, Mario. And folks know, and Mario knows that we're working with to try to identify the issue, working with even the water board and kind of all of the other different partners. I appreciate even this collaborative effort with Dr. Sinclair. Maybe Dr. Sinclair has other things that we can talk about related to the odors and the wastewater. I will say, Mario, if we can, I know I'm not saying what you're discussing is unrelated to pesticides, but we do have a presentation to continue from Dr. Sinclair and from CARB about the air pesticide monitoring that
Yeah, that's the only reason. The only reason why I mentioned it is because how he says that, the pesticides and all that. And I just, if I could get answers off of him or get something off of him, and then I learn something and I gain something. And that's why I do this. I'm not trying to mess up the meeting. I just want to figure out what could I do for my community. That's all.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Thank you.
It's great. And what I was going to say here is that there's a lot of aspects of your question that I still wanted to talk about actually in the rest of my presentation. But ECV, it drains all the ag water and all the agriculture drains into the Salton Sea. And odors are one of the major health concerns of the Salton Sea. And, like the concerns that people have, the Salton Sea is one of the biggest concern there. So yes, and my other project with water and microbiology, we're actually measuring H2S or measuring odors. We have an H2S sensor and all of this. But as far as the air monitoring goes, we used a preference survey with our community. And we actually looked at where the sensitive receptors are. These are all schools and other sensitive receptor sites. We looked at where the mobile home parks are. These are clusters of mobile home parks. And all of these kind of map data. This is all the different population centers there for Mecca, North Shore, Mecca, Oasis, North Shore, Thermal, and Coachella. And then we did a survey, and this is where everybody said the monitors should go. And these were for the air monitors, but the same idea is for the pesticides. And this is where people wanted them. And if you look back and forth with these maps, they're roughly the same spot is where the population centers are. So from there, we went out and, or the AQMD actually, and the CARB assessed on the DPR, assessed where those should be. And those were in those red dots right there. And that's where they're putting them. And those are all spots that are like right next to where people are, but also right next to fields. And that's kind of the process that they had. This is an example of one of the slides that they had for us over there, talking about where this concentration of metam sodium was going to be. And you can see that from the DPR data, you can see where all the high use areas are. And so that's kind of impacted it. And that's one of those that impacted it. And I just wanted to also show you that they had a couple of different sites. They have to have a main site where they have the calibration instruments, and then they have 2 other sites which didn't have the calibration instruments. And so this was at one of the high school or the Mecca Fire Station, and this is at the Tribal Torres Martinez headquarters. And then they gave us a schedule of when they're going to be doing all this monitoring, and it was from November 28 all the way up until February 24. And that was because that is the time when those pesticides are applied the most. So that's really all I wanted to talk about. And, you know, those slides, I guess you're sharing those out, but I definitely have a lot more to say about these other issues with agricultural wastewater and the nutrients and all of this. But I think for the air monitoring, this is what our AQMD is, and CARB and DPR and everybody is and all the other players are doing. One thing that I wanted to state though is this all moved really fast, and if I could really get more feedback on it as a steering committee member from farm workers some more, and work with some of the local organizations like Leadership Council we have, I think you all have that up there, as well as Líderes Campesinas. They might be up there as well, I'm not sure, but I didn't get enough feedback from Líderes Campesinas in the CSC, but Leadership Council certainly contributed. But it would be nice to make sure that Líderes is on all of the meetings, and they really understand with their farm workers and getting good feedback and participation from them. That would be my, like, if we had to do it over. And also I haven't yet seen the results. So that's all I'm going to say for now. I mean, there's a lot to talk about here, but yeah.
I so appreciate it. Dr. Sinclair, it sounds like you have a lot of information that you said that you would like to address some of Mario's other concerns that are related. I'm wondering if you're able to stay with us the whole meeting, since I think what you just presented in your slides transitions really well to CARB slides. If you're able to stay with us and we have time at the end, would you be willing to stay at the end and maybe talk in further detail about some of the concerns Mario just discussed?
Sure. Yeah. As far as the agricultural wastewater, I mean, that's a big thing, and it's an issue in the Eastern Coachella Valley as well. So
awesome. Well, I so appreciate it. And then I'll pass it to CARB, but Mario, if that works for you, that way we can still have that exchange while still kind of connecting the two.
Yeah. It's because I got other questions too from sewer water, because they're dumping sewer water on so locations too, and maybe I could get some more information on that too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what they're doing out there, but I have worked. I want to work with wastewater the most. That's the thing I like working with the most. So yeah.
Sounds like we found the right person. Well, I so appreciate it. And I want to acknowledge, to your point, Dr. Sinclair, we have lots of great community-based organizations on this call right now that I think have connections to some of the farm working community and the residents. So I just appreciate that acknowledgement that that's important early on. All right, I'll pass it to CARB and we'll keep going. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Sinclair, for providing a lot of that background information from EPD. So I'll go ahead and I'm James Pham, monitoring liaison for CARB. I'll be presenting some of the overview of the whole process, and then what we're also presenting some information specifically from Arvin, Lamont towards the end. Okay. All right, can everyone see the slides? Okay, I need to minimize. Sorry, I'm going off camera for a sec for this because it's kind of taking up the screen. Okay, so here's our agenda. Some of the topics I'll be reviewing today in this presentation. Dr. Sinclair has already presented. And then we'll be going into kind of overview of what CARB, the approach is for Arvin, Lamont. So how we'll be conducting, how we have been conducting air monitoring, the entire process and potential timeline, historical usage for the Arvin Lamont community. And then towards the end, just open it up to discussion. So just going back on some of the things we kind of know already, just want to review the CERT measure. So CARB will be responsible for planning and conducting field monitoring activities. And then we'll also be providing the lab analysis that's also related to the monitoring. So this image here shows the exercise that was completed in the December 2022 in-person CSC. Just want to note that, you know, there were concerns at number 4 and 7. So this looks like kind of on the west side of Arvin, and then this would be kind of WEPAC area. And then there were other older issues, I guess, numbers 3 and 6. There wasn't much information provided, so I'm not sure if the concerns were for pesticides or for other issues. So just reviewing monitoring, the relationship between CARB and DPR. CARB and DPR have been working for over 30 years collaboratively. So more recently, CARB has been in a support role to operate the ambient network site. And some of these sites were in San Joaquin City, Lindsay, Cuyama, Shafter, Oxnard, and then a few others. And then over the 2017-2018 timeframe, CARB ran 6 seasonal studies, seasonal monitoring studies for pesticides. So they were in Fresno, Kern County, Imperial, Tulare, Santa Barbara, and Siskiyou County. So I want to highlight Kern County because Arvin was one of these sites, and they were monitoring for organophosphates at the time. And here's a QR code. If you want to scan it with your phone, it'll bring you directly to the report. And in terms of conducting air monitoring, so we want to make sure there's a couple of different things that line up. We want to make sure that there are monitoring and laboratory methods that already exist for the compounds of interest. Air samples are collected in either sorbent tubes or vacuum canisters, and laboratory analysis is required for these type of sample media. And what that means is that we'll be physically collecting the samples and having to bring them back from the field and back to the lab. And so in this current state, with monitoring, real-time measurements aren't available. I think only because some of these aren't, the methods aren't as robust as some of the more, I guess, the things that we want, we have standards for, such as PM 2.5. So sample collection, again, going back on the media, staff will have to be there on site to collect each and every sample. And usually we run these samples for 24 hours, and then, you know, someone would have to be there to set up and also to pick up on time. The laboratory extraction and analysis can be complex. So right now we're looking at results that can take, you know, 6 to 9 months to finally be released after monitoring is completed. So looking at some of the monitoring equipment, you can see pictures here. On the right side is a vacuum canister, and on the left is a sorbent tube. And really, depending on what we're looking for, we'll be using different kinds of media. And then the types of samplers we'll be using are the MET1 staff. We ran a custom staff that we called a pesticide staff for the network site. A Dontech 901, which is a vacuum canister sampler. And then what we did in ECV is just using vacuum pumps and rotometers or flow controllers to control the flow. And here are some pictures of the sample samplers. In the top left here, we have in the black box, there's a pump and a power adapter to keep the box is there to keep everything dry and in operating condition. And then you can see at the top of the pole, there's a couple pieces of metal fittings that will help hold the sorbent tubes. And this site was at the San Joaquin Elementary School in San Joaquin City. Bottom left is a Dontech 901 canister sampler. And then on the right side is a MET1 SAS sampler. So in terms of capturing and managing data, we want to make sure there are field and laboratory standard operating procedures, just so we can do everything, I guess, follow a procedure so everything can be repeated if necessary. And since we have multiple staff running sites, we want everything consistent. We want to follow an air monitoring plan, have proper documentation of all the samples. That includes the chain of custody forms and using traceable flow standards. And then the data, we're planning to have that available on AQView once that is completed. So the monitoring process, we're looking at to first assess some of the past usage from DPR's pesticide use report, to gather community feedback. And that's where we kind of are now. And then to work with the community on kind of narrowing down the compounds of interest, drafting an air monitoring plan with community guidance, finalizing that plan, and to identify and establish sites within the community. And so we're kind of bullet 2 right now, between 2 and 3. So we're hoping to finish some of these other items towards the end of Q3. And then we're planning to start, if really based on high use seasons of the pesticides, start monitoring towards the end of this year. And then in 2024, the laboratory analysis and data hopefully would be available at that time. So in terms of assessing compounds of interest, what we're looking for is a variety of different things. And this isn't the whole list, but these are things we can consider. So in terms of timing, we want to look at the high use months or seasons. How much is being used in the community? Are these compounds, are they toxic air contaminants? Are they volatile? So, or fumigant? So that would allow us to actually sample in the air, because not all of these compounds would volatilize and be found in the air. The health impacts, community concerns, and are there methods available for monitoring? So in terms of Arvin Lamont data, these are the high use compounds in the community. So we have kind of the highest use would be combined into MITC, which is the actual breakdown product of both metam sodium and metam potassium. So that's about 46%. And then the next one is sulfur, mineral oil, 1,3-dichloropropene or 1,3-D is about 8% used in the community. And this is all based off of weight of active ingredient. And this data is actually from 2019 to 2021. And yeah, we want to thank DPR for providing that data to us. And Dr. Sinclair has already reviewed some of this. So what happened in Eastern Coachella Valley, another AB 617 community, we had 3 monitoring locations, and we did seasonal monitoring, seasonal intensive monitoring. And that what that means is it's during high use periods. We ran 4 consecutive 24-hour samples per week and on a randomized schedule. So we can kind of capture different, I guess, days throughout the entire campaign. And the results are pending. They just finished monitoring mid-February. And yeah, with that said, I just want to open to community discussion. What are the concerns of the community? Are there any causes for the concern? Are there odors, or have you seen maybe possible incorrect usage? Any locations that we might want to pinpoint, aside from what's been pointed out already? And at what times, when have you been concerned? And here's the contact information for some of the team that is working on this study. So if you have any questions that might be related to certain things, feel free to reach out to us.
James, I'm wondering if you want to pull up that slide that has those prompting questions. And that way folks can kind of keep thinking about those questions as sort of a starting point.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, slide 14, I think.
Yeah, sorry, I actually missed this slide. So if
Yeah.
anyone wants to pull up their phone and scan these links, the slide has already been provided on the Healthier Living page. So if you need to refer to this later, but these are some resources that the community can look at for more information regarding pesticides. So yeah, I just want to open it up to any community discussion.
While folks are maybe thinking, can I just I might ask a couple clarifying questions. So we as a group have already seen from past presentations in this subcommittee a great map. And I think that Dr. Sinclair showed something similar where DPR had a map of where high pesticide use was already occurring. Is that something that you all will be using in consideration too of where to place monitors?
Yeah. So we're still working on that with some of the newer data. DPR presented that in the past, kind of a heat spot or heat map of what's been used and where. But we do have newer data that I guess would be applicable to the community and kind of making that decision.
And for folks, I'll drop that in the chat as a reminder of what that looked like. Thank you, James.
Yeah, if if you can't think of a question now, I'm available. My email was posted, so feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah, I got a question on that. 40% of is for pesticides. Because I'm concerned with that because it's a lot. It's real high for 40%, 40-something% of whatever they're throwing out there. That's a lot.
Yeah. So are you mentioning the slide that's up, the MITC? Yes. DPR may be able to speak more about this, but it is really what's being used is driven by what is being planted in the community, what the crops are. So MITC is kind of broadly used to treat soil, to clean up the soil before anything is planted.
Yeah.
So I understand, it seems like a high number, but it's really driven by what the farmers are growing as well.
Is it low? Is it low? The percentage, is it real low? I mean, I see it high because over here they plant carrots and potatoes and not many vegetables, more almond and apples and orange.
Yeah, just take into consideration that this is just a percentage of the total amount that's being used in the community. I don't have offhand the actual poundage of what's being used out there. I can provide that a little bit later.
Mario and James, I just put 2 pictures in the chat. I'm happy to drop the link to the presentation that DPR gave a few meetings ago. So it has been some time, specifically regarding the MITC levels and where it's being used in the pound, so how much is being used, to your point, James. But Mario, what I'm hearing, and I wrote this down, is that this is clearly one of maybe the pesticides of concern and potentially one that we want to identify, right, as being a,
Yes.
we should monitor for it, right?
Yeah, that we could know, in the future, we could figure out if they're using higher, volume on the pesticides, and part of that is at least we know where's the location and we could put a monitor there.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. That's something we're all taking into consideration, where it's being used as well. And, back to Dr. Sinclair's presentation, where the sensitive receptors are, and we really want to listen to the community concern before we actually place anything anywhere. We want to, provide the best information we can to the community. That would be best, most beneficial to how you make your decisions in the future.
Okay, sign me up. I'm ready.
Thanks, Mario. I do see Sandra's hand.
Yeah, I had a quick question. With the sites, and I guess this is kind of a question for everyone on the call, basically, but like, where would it be most beneficial to put the receptors? And because I know Dr. Sinclair said that we should put them probably like next to fields, or I know Arvin, Lamont, I know our entire boundary is a little bit more different than the Eastern Coachella Valley, but I think it would be great if like everyone kind of started brainstorming where like the best place to put these receptors would be. That being said, Dr. Sinclair, if you're still on the call, I think it would be great if we kind of had your input on where you believe like the best receptors would be, whether it's like directly near a field. And I know you talked about this a little bit and I might have missed it. But would it be like right directly next to a field, in someone's backyard, at a school, and what that process kind of would look like? Because I know I'm assuming with schools we would have to ask permission. So like, what are kind of the boundaries that the ECV had to go through that we should kind of expect here as well?
Hey, I'm on right now if you want me to answer that.
Please, that would be great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, okay. Citing the place to collect the sample, in other words, choosing the location is probably the hardest part of all of this. And because you're really taking a gamble, because you can only do it in a few different spots, and you have to make sure, number one, that you're going to have a hit on that. You're going to get what you're looking for, because you don't want to go and sample and then get nothing, because that's discouraging. But the general siting characteristics, siting meaning like choosing the site, were that the community wanted was definitely sensitive receptors. So definitely next to schools and nursing homes and daycares and hospitals like that. You wanted to have it close to people who are sensitive, and also communities and trailer parks and those things. But you also wanted to make sure that you're going to get a positive hit. I think that the DPR definitely wants to make sure that they're addressing the sensitive receptor sites. So the ideal site would be like the transition between those two zones. And then it gets even more complicated, because you have to look at which way the wind blows. And then you have to look at when those pesticides are applied, like what season are they applied? And that's how you really decide on where you're going to do your sampling. And then another really neat thing is to try to look to see at those pesticide use reports that they have and who has bought them. You can download all that data. They have it in an open format, and look at those maps and see for all of these different pesticides where they're used. And that should be a guide as well. So there's really like 5 or 6 different criteria, and you have to sort of meet with everybody and weigh it out. And I don't know, I feel like the most important one is the sensitive receptor and getting it close to an actual field, so you don't get a 0, because you don't want to get a non-detect or a 0, because then you don't know. That doesn't mean that it's not there. It just means you didn't get a hit. And I can talk with you all again about like what we did there and how the steering committee was able to sort of weigh in on it. There's a lot of different methods you can engage people with. We used what was it? Survey 123. It's a software with a map. And we just had people go in and choose a site on the map where they think it should be. And that was really helpful. And then we generated a heat map from that. And then they typed up a bunch of other reasons why they wanted to have it there. And I could show you that if you're interested, Sandra.
Yeah, that would be super helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And if I can have you maybe unshare your screen, James, I was going to share, we did, for all of you who remember, who've been from the beginning, if you remember, we use something called social pinpoint, Dr. Sinclair, which sounds like it's a very similar concept. We have been able to use, we did it to establish our community air monitoring network, but of course, folks, we asked them where they wanted any kind of monitoring. We did not specify whether it had to be, district type of compounds or if it had to be pesticides. And I will share with you right now, just on my screen really briefly, and this can be a tool we continue to use. I filtered this map, and it's a little bit fuzzy because of the way I had to filter it. But I essentially filtered this map by all of the blue is where folks from the CSC indicated that pesticide monitoring needed to occur. So to your point, there are, and it looks like it aligns well with what we saw in the December meeting in person when we had in-person mapping. So we're open to, working with DPR and CARB to open something like this up. Maybe we just reopen this survey to get more input to Dr. Sinclair's point, and Sandra's point, so that it's community driven. And maybe one of the things we do is we overlay this with the scientific information that we have from DPR about where we're actually seeing pesticides, at least, from the DPR perspective. So we're definitely open to that. And we have, I don't want you all to think that we haven't taken all of your points into consideration. So this is what folks have already provided us. So I just wanted to share that. I do see that Lily has her hand up.
Sorry. Yeah, thanks. I just kind of wanted to add to that point that was being discussed, Dr. Sinclair and Sandra, I believe, about where to put monitors and, that balancing act. I think that that's part of the thing that really resonates in my mind, mostly because I'm, trying to address those health concern parts of, all of the community exposure. And it's the exposure that really results in that connection to health outcome. And so in the traditional thought, if someone's not exposed, you shouldn't expect a health effect, because if you're not exposed, you have no means of toxicity in the scientific space. So balancing, getting a hit on a monitor to collect data is important, but also getting a hit, so to speak, in terms of like, are you near community? Are people anywhere nearby? Is the weather, wind, all of the meteorology connected enough to actually blow it in the direction of residences and where community are? Or is it like a buffer space and it's not really much of a concern because people don't live there? And that's where I think that balance of knowing a community better because you guys live there and know where the things are versus our like general map, and we don't really know where things are because we're looking at a map. And I think that trying to strike that balance is that like sweet spot that it really does need that conversation.
I'm hearing general consensus around doing some sort of activity to sort of gather that information. And I'm seeing some nodding. So I think that sounds awesome to us, districts supporting that effort. I do think there are other pieces, and I think Mario helped kick this off really well of, the one piece is where and the other piece is what. And so I did hear, MITC, I think we've heard about 1,3D a lot in these subcommittees. Are there other, folks maybe that are on the ground that have kind of worked in this space? Are there other things that we want to discuss or are concerned about, or just need more information about as we give feedback to CARB? And I see Mario's hand.
I feel what we have to do is really group up our community, get them together, and maybe put a map there and find out the real concern, what people have to say for, for this matter. I mean, we know about it. but there's a lot of community, they don't know about it. And I would like to have some education for these people to, I thought they could speak out what's out there. And I think we'll get more information on that, and know where could we really look at. Instead of one person saying it, it's better off a lot of people saying it at a certain locations. And I think we'll get educated the same time they get educated on this thing, what we're trying to do. And I feel that we should get the community together and hopefully get more information and answers. And I think that what we should do. I mean, I don't, that's what I think.
Thank you, Mario. Others thoughts on what Mario just shared or proposed, or thoughts on continuing to do some sort of exercise or combination of the two, or maybe just support for that? Is there any, can I just maybe see some thumbs up from folks if we think that a mapping exercise makes sense as one kind of final, not final, but one next feedback, spatial feedback. Thank you, Gustavo. I see that. I know that Mario agrees. I'm not seeing any opposition. I see Sandra, thank you. So I'll just commit to CARB and to DPR. The district can definitely help with that and work on that. And maybe in designing that can be a twofold, location and type, if there's thoughts on kind of the type of pesticide to monitor. And it sounds like, I think Dr. Sinclair's point, I think at least this is the way we've approached it from the district side is, at the end of the day, you are all, we're each experts, right, in what we know, but we need each other to like put the full picture together, right? And so I do think one of the pieces that's going to continue to be really important is that DPR piece where they know exactly what's being used and where and when. And then you all as a community can use that to inform or based on your own experiences, collaborate, and we can use that to inform, where and what we actually want to monitor for in this plan.
I was just going to ask Jess, you pasted the heat map in there, but I'm not exactly sure what the heat map is heating.
Oh yeah, sorry, I mentioned,
There's no
that
legend
earlier, but maybe I wasn't clear. The heat map, this is everyone that is a heat map version of what I just shared on the screen. So it is a heat map of anyone who mentioned pesticides during our air monitoring mapping exercise that we did back in now 2021 when we first started doing air monitoring discussions. So that's where folks in that air monitoring discussion mentioned they felt pesticides should be at those locations. And so I was just acknowledging that it looks like that was in 2021. And then just a couple of months ago in person in 2022, we did an exercise and folks mentioned the same location. So I'm just mentioning that there seems to be a pretty obvious pattern so far, but I'm not saying that it's not worth continuing to get feedback from folks. Any other feedback for CARB or DPR or OEHA about the air monitoring kind of plan or piece?
Oh, I just wanted to add that in the ECV, we were able to survey non-CSC members as well as CSC members. So just make sure that you get the non-CSC farm workers and people that live there.
I like that. Yeah, and I think folks on this call have been so helpful with that. And we just had a meeting for those that were on it last week where we had feedback from over 100 residents about a different measure and not all CSC members. So it's a great reminder. Great. Well, I think in terms of agency next steps, at least from the district side, we can work with CARB and DPR on an interactive exercise to get, I'll just say community feedback, not necessarily CSC feedback on location. Is there anything else CARB or DPR you're looking for from the group in order to move forward besides that feedback? Awesome. Well, with that, I did promise that we would have extra time to engage with Dr. Sinclair about a different matter. And so for folks, I'll just acknowledge that our next pesticide subcommittee, I'm going to mess this up. Is it May 30th? Ooh, hold on. Thought I had it up. Our next pesticide subcommittee is going to be, yay, May 30th. Right now on the agenda is enforcement. I will work with the co-leads who I think unfortunately couldn't be here, but to talk about, of course, that's an important piece, but maybe we don't spend the whole time and we have an update on the progress that we've made today. I don't want to lose what progress we've made and have to wait till our next meeting to update. So maybe we'll save a little bit of space for update and next steps. But then spend the rest of the time on enforcement, which was a really important piece for you all. With that, if there are no other questions about this topic, we can officially end the meeting, but we will stay on and engage in a discussion that's related, certainly, that Mario was just mentioning to Dr. Sinclair about the other piece, right, of some of these pesticide applications, which is certainly the water and kind of the after effects. So take it away. And I appreciate everyone else being on this call. Thank you.
Oh, well, as far as those, if there's odors and if there's concerns about pesticides or other chemicals from the wastewater, from the agricultural runoff, then I think that the air monitoring can also tackle that, because ultimately this group is to look at chemicals in the air. And if there is a real consistent concern about that, then definitely I think it should be brought up to, be tackled by this group. Maybe even as one of the sites that you're looking at. I don't know where those sites are for the ag waste, but if odor there is an issue, then definitely at least, our AQMD, South Coast AQMD, they have a bunch of equipment and mobile monitoring and things, and they go around and they're able to kind of determine what they need to measure in those sites. So in the Salton Sea area, for example, they've put up H2S monitors and also multi-metal monitors all over the place. And in the H2S in a couple of places and multi-metals in one site, but they also have mobile monitoring where they can go around and investigate certain things. So maybe that's an approach to see what those odors are, to see if they're in the classification even of pesticides or if there's something else. Because in the Salton Sea, the ag runoff from all of those fields goes into the Salton Sea, and we didn't consider this when I first started working on it a few years ago, but there's a lot of sulfur compounds in the ag runoff. And one of the major issues of the Salton Sea is the H2S gases that come out of it. So and just to state, this is a really complicated issue too, because this is a lot of things mixing together. You have nutrients and fertilizers and pesticides, and you don't know what's going on there. So Jessica, you were about to say something.
Oh, no, I was just going to acknowledge, and I think Mario and folks know this, we do have mobile monitoring. We had a safety issue, and we're undergoing repairs, but that is something we're committed to doing, and we've been working with Mario. But I do think one piece that you mentioned, just to kind of bring it home to what Mario's mentioning, is sort of the layers of monitoring, right? It sounds like what South Coast does is what we're trying to do as well, is you mobile monitor, start to identify, and then see if the next level can be, oh, hey, CARB, we need to put a pesticide monitor here, or district, maybe we consider a different type of district monitor here. Maria, your hand is raised, and I'd love your feedback.
Well, yeah, we got multiple locations here in our town right here, Lamont and Arvin. We got all kinds of stuff. We got recycling centers, we got dump sites, we got wastewater. We got the refinery. We got the sewer plant here. And we got multiple places that we could put the monitors. I don't know where to start. It's kind of hard for me to explain, what I'm seeing. And it's just hard to figure out what could I do really, because I'm getting lost out of words now.
Well,
Because
I hope-
it's a real big concern for me, because we are having health issues here. And I just want to have a better place to live in. And for my kids, the future of my kids and the kids who live here.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out what could we really do.
Yeah. Thank you, Mario. And I think one of the things, I'm just so grateful to have you and all of the really engaged residents we have on this call today, and the one, our regular CSC calls. I think that's everyone's goal, and that's the motivation for being here. And I just appreciate, the progress we've so far been able to make, but how much further we have to go. And I think that's what you're sharing, is that there's still a lot of monitoring to understand, and then a lot of action to take action, right, and actually reduce the impacts to folks. And so I just appreciate that as well, and definitely appreciate Dr. Sinclair's insight. It sounds like it aligns, but maybe we can continue to learn from the other communities. That's the benefit of 617, right, is learning from what everyone else is doing too. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate your insight, and we will definitely take into account your thoughts on making sure that everyone's included in identifying where these monitors could go. So I just want to thank you for that. And I do see Lily's hand.
So for my own lack of experience and knowledge in the monitoring technologies and spaces of what can be monitored, I think if there's a conversation that could be joined with, the scientific knowledge that I and others bring, with so much complexity to air pollution, is there a way to figure out more specifically what is its components? So for example, I understand CARB has developed this, for lack of better words, website that shares what type of toxics comes out of different sectors. So is there a way of bridging, what is known to come out of different sectors with what can be monitored? And then that would begin to help connect to known health effects of certain toxics. So, I mean, in my kind of perfect world, it's like if we all give a little to bridge what we each know in our respective spaces of expertise, that is really how progress is made. Thank you, Mario.
Thank you, Lily, and thank you, Mario.
Yeah, Mario, and feeling overwhelmed by it is totally fine and normal. I mean, there's so many different chemicals and potential mixes out there, and it gets really complicated when you have to figure out which agency responds. But it sounds like the air district at least is going to help make that initial cut to determine this is DPR, this is, I don't know, this is the water district, or this is the wastewater. But especially when you get the mixing of the wastewater, like the human wastewater and then the agricultural wastewater, and you get odors, and Salton Sea is a huge mixing basin. And so we're starting to struggle with that. And then you realize there's all this interagency stuff. That's why I'm overall optimistic about the DPR in the Eastern Coachella Valley, because it represents something that's pretty rare in this sort of setting, is that agencies coming together, which is highly unusual. So I think it's a good thing. We just have to keep hitting on those things that the community wants. And even myself, I feel a little bit ashamed that I actually don't live in the ECB, but I'm representing them for some degree. But I do think that you've just got to keep pushing, and we get these things monitored, and health improves. That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, I feel that we should all get together, all the agencies and all that, because the The reason is there's a lot of confusion on what we are doing. Especially when people start pointing finger here, pointing finger there, and they get you going in circles. And the good part is that when we get together, we learn off each other and we get better knowledge of what we are fighting for and what we are attacking and all that to get a better way to fix up our problem. And I feel that CARB, WECA, and all them should get together, and OSHA and all them get together like that. We could have a solution and everything what we are working for. You know, all of us, we are working hard to better something, you know, to get something fixed. And I'm grateful. I'm very grateful because they do talk to me and try to educate me a little bit more what I'm really fighting about. And that's what we need, to us to get united and get together to figure out what can we do for our community. Yeah, that's what I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. I appreciate that. It's a good plug for our April CSC meeting, when we are also bringing a totally different topic, but much similarly interagency, when we talk about oil and gas impacts, and we're bringing CalGEM and the Department of Conservation to the group. So just a good reminder that this whole process is about interagency collaboration. I agree with Dr. Sinclair, not that that wasn't happening, but it wasn't happening in this transparent space with community groups at the same time. And so I just appreciate that we get to do this and that you all work with us on this. And I am grateful for all the feedback that we heard today. So any other questions or thoughts on the pesticide subcommittee before we we've already officially once closed it, but we can have second closure of the second half of the meeting and give you your evening back. Well, I want to thank, and if folks can join me in thanking Dr. Sinclair for being here. Not only was it nice to have someone from a different community, but also obviously very knowledgeable. You know, we might reach out again, Dr. Sinclair, with maybe some of the expertise that you have. So
No problem. Yeah.
So appreciate you. I appreciate everyone else that spent the rest, you know, this afternoon with us, and definitely appreciate all of the feedback. We will be getting together and talking about next steps with our agency partners and reaching out to all of you about some of the feedback we're looking for. So with that, I will have us turn off the meeting, and I'll say good night and see some of you later.
Okay. Bye-bye.